All right, let's dive into something we use every single day, but do we ever really think about it? I'm talking about money. And let me tell you, its story is way more surprising and way more human than you'd ever guess.
So, you know that image we all have in our heads, right? The classic scene, some ancient guy with a goat trying to trade it for a sack of grain. It's like History 101. But what if I told you that whole picture, the very foundation of how we think money got started, is probably wrong?
Yeah, for the longest time, we just assumed everyone bartered. But, when we actually look at the evidence from early societies, it tells a completely different story. It turns out early human economies weren't really about on-the-spot trades at all. They were built on relationships, on debt. So think of it less like a marketplace and more like a community-wide IOU system, a giant informal tab of who owes who what.
And look, this whole system of social credit, it worked beautifully in those small, tight-knit communities where everybody knew everybody. But what happens when those communities start to get bigger? Well, that's when this informal system really starts to fall apart.
The problem really is scale. I mean, a system of favors is great when you know everyone, right? You trust that Dave's going to be around next week to pay you back that chicken he owes you. But what happens when your village blows up into a city? Now you're dealing with total strangers. How do you trust them? You can't. You need a new way to track all this value, something a lot more solid than just a mental IOU.
And this is where we get the first things that start to look like the money we know today, commodity money. We're talking about stuff that everyone agreed had value. Cattle, for example, were basically a walking, mooing bank account. Or cowrie shells. They were used for centuries across Africa and Asia because they were tough, easy to carry, and pretty hard to fake. And get this, salt. It was so vital for preserving food that Roman soldiers actually got paid in it. That's literally where we get the word salary. How cool is that?
Okay, so using commodities was a huge leap forward, but it wasn't perfect, right? It still had its headaches. You had to weigh the silver, you had to check if the salt was pure. It was a pain. So the next big breakthrough? That came when a central power, a state, stepped in to fix this exact problem.
So let's go back in time. We're heading to around 600 BCE, to the kingdom of Lydia. That's in modern-day Turkey. This is where a king named Alyattes has this absolutely brilliant idea. He takes this stuff called electrum, which is this mix of gold and silver that you can just find in nature there, and he starts stamping it into little discs. And just like that, the world's first official coins are born.
Now, the idea here was completely revolutionary. See, a coin isn't just a hunk of metal. It's a promise from the government. By stamping his official seal on it, a lion's head in this case, the king was basically saying, I guarantee this thing has a certain weight and has a certain purity. You can trust it.
And this was a game changer. All of a sudden, you didn't need to trust the random merchant you were buying from. You didn't even really have to trust the metal itself anymore. All you had to do was trust the king's stamp. And just like that, money became this tool of the state, a little piece of government authority you could literally carry around in your pocket.
So for hundreds and hundreds of years, money meant metal. It was heavy, it was real, you could bite it. But the next big jump, well, that was going to require a huge leap of faith into something that felt like it was worth, well, nothing at all. I'm talking about paper.
And this whole idea, it wasn't some grand philosophical concept. It was born out of a really practical problem. Picture this, it's 11th century China. You're a merchant on the Silk Road, and you're just sick and tired of dragging these incredibly heavy and frankly dangerous chests full of coins everywhere. So what do? You start leaving your coins with someone you trust, and you trade with the paper receipts they give you instead. It didn't take long for the government to see this and think, hey, wait a minute. We can just make the paper ourselves, and boom, official paper money was born.
And to give you an idea of just how wild this concept was, when Marco Polo got back to Europe and tried to tell people about it, that in China they were using pieces of paper as money, people pretty much laughed at him. They thought he was making it up. The whole idea was just too weird, too abstract. It was so out there that it would take Europe another 400 years to really get on board.
So what the Song Dynasty invented is what we now call fiat money. Fiat is just a fancy Latin word that means let it be done. Basically, it's money that has value just because the government says so, period. The value isn't in the paper or in some gold locked away in a vault. The value is purely in our collective trust in the government that's printing it. Okay, so we went from metal to paper, and from there, the process of money becoming less and less physical just went into overdrive. I mean, especially in the last 70 years or so, money has pretty much completely shed its physical form and transformed into what it mostly is today, pure information.
And things really start to speed up from here. Think about it. The 1950s, the first credit card appears, turning money into a little plastic promise. Then, 1971, this is a huge one. The US completely cuts the dollar's link to gold. And just like that, pretty much all the world's money becomes pure fiat. And then, of course, 2009, Bitcoin shows up with an even crazier idea. What if we could have money that doesn't rely on trust in banks or governments at all?
So, after this whole incredible journey, from favors and IOUs to shells to coins to paper, and now to digital bits on a screen, where does that leave us? What have we actually learned? What is money when you really get down to it?
Well, when you look at the progression, the pattern is just undeniable, isn't it? The entire history of money is one long story of abstraction. It's this slow, unstoppable march away from physical stuff, separating the idea of value from any single object. And that's the key takeaway, the whole point. Money was never really about the shell, or the gold coin, or the piece of paper. It's always been about the story. It's a story that we all agree to believe in. It's probably the most powerful and successful work of fiction humanity has ever created. It's the ultimate expression of our social trust.
And that story is still being written, right now. From cryptocurrencies to digital dollars, the very nature of that shared story is changing again. So as we look ahead, the big question isn't just about technology. It's about us. What's the next chapter going to be? What story are we going to choose to believe in next? Thanks for joining me.